a little nephew of mine, whenever he would have to do something that he really wanted to do, something that he really looked forward to, and he would finally get the chance to do, he'd get so excited that he'd get ill. He would, sometimes need to actually vomit with excitement. He would be so looking forward to the thing, so looking forward to whatever it was, and at the same time, kind of terrified of it. Right? I'm not sure if you ever had that experience. I think it might happen to us more readily when we get a small bit older, and there's something you really, really want, something that you've been looking forward to, something that you've been preparing for, something that you want, and at the same time you're terrified of it. So, like, even if it's, say, let's take the example of sport. You really want to win a county final, club final, whatever it is, and then when you get there, the semi-final is like the nerves. The nerves, that's in the pit of your stomach, like your stomach is just going ballistic. It's like there's some live creature in there just moving around the whole time. You're so kind of, but this is what you wanted. As in, this is what you trained for. This is why you joined the club. So it's what you want, but you're terrified of it at the same time. And then I think as we grow up, again, a little further, we enter into things called relationships, which are, I think, a similar thing that you want and yet terrify you. And then that relationship or that situation might grow into marriage, right? Which I think then is maybe a continuation of, might be a continuation of the same thing. It's something you want, but at the same time you fear it. Because you want something, but at the same time there's a risk. There's a risk there. Because now this is a person you care an awful lot about, that you give your heart to, hopefully. You share the deepest parts of your heart, hopefully. And yet at the same time, they're a human being, so they're flawed. So they might not always understand how you'd like them to react to a certain problem or situation. So you want communion, but you're terrified of it at the same time. You want it and you fear it at the same time. And that's, I was just listening to a podcast during the week where one of the speakers said that. She said, when it comes to communion with God, it's something we want, but at the same time, we might fear it. So I know that in my prayer life, I'm supposed to get to know God better. Like, this is to put it in basic terms. In my prayer life, I'm supposed to get to know the Lord. I'm supposed to have maybe a friendship with Him. Okay, but if I let Him in too far, He might start to change things that I don't want to change, or He might require things of me that I would like to control myself. So I want God, but I also fear that relationship at the same time. Very interesting. This internal dynamic that can be going on within us. So we want control, we want God, and they're kind of mutually exclusive, because you can't have full control over things and want God, because the Lord will change your plans. Look at the life of any saint you want. The Lord changed their plans. The Lord will, and this is deliberate. This isn't Him forgetting about them, but the Lord shows us one step at a time. He doesn't show us the whole journey. If He showed us the whole journey, I think we think that would be easier. Then I'd know how all of these crosses, difficulties, how all of this works out in the end. Then I'd know. Surely it's better if you know the conclusion of the story, right? Well, not necessarily. I think it was the curé of Ars said, if I had known how much I would suffer in my priesthood, I would have died. Died with fright. It's better that we don't know the full story. It also means we have the opportunity to choose to walk in faith. So the Lord might show us the next step, just the next step, maybe the next two, but He won't show us the whole story. And then it's up to us to walk in faith. And that might absolutely create fear. So I want it, and I fear it. I want God, and I kind of fear Him getting in too far. In the same way that we can fear a human relationship. Having to trust another flawed human being with your heart. That's terrifying. Maybe it's just me. Maybe that's why I became a priest. I don't know. But to actually trust another person with your heart, that's difficult. Because what if they get it wrong? What if they don't understand? What if they come up short in some way? So, same with people. We can keep people at arm's length, and we share a certain amount, but not really too much. Same with God. God can take care of the chronic things. God can take care of the cancer diagnosis and world peace and Ukraine and the Holy Land and the Holy Father and whatever Mother Teresa needs. God will take care of those things. Okay. But as regards my interior life, it's better we don't let him in too far, because I'm not sure what he'll change. Now, this, again, isn't us just being bad, but it's often the result of flawed relationships. I met a lady years ago. I was a very younger priest at the time, and she had been abandoned by her parents, so she ended up in a foster home where she had been abused in the foster home. And then they found a family for her, and she was free of this home and entrusted to this family, where then in that family she was abused again. Now, when she told me the story, I was like, is this possible? This is just, you couldn't make it up. It's like a horror story, So then she got married to a really good guy, and found it immensely difficult to trust him. And I've never been through anything like that, but you can kind of empathize. My goodness, if your trust has been betrayed so often, is it worth trusting at all? Can you really trust anyone if this experience was so bad and that experience was so bad, and now we're in a different situation, but it looks okay for the moment. It looks safe-ish, but you never really know, do you? No, you don't. So it's just better keep everything and everyone at arm's distance. This podcast, okay, I'll confess the podcast, it was Abiding Together. It's kind of girly, but it was very, very good. And it was Sister Miriam James then who said, we've been created for community, okay? But sometimes we shame ourselves for needing community. So we think we're creating God's image and likeness. God is a Trinity, so God is in constant communion with the other. So God the Father is in constant communion with the Son and the Holy Spirit, and vice versa. So they're in constant communion. They're a family. So there's a constant giving and receiving of infinite love from each person in the community towards the other. So they give themselves entirely out of love, and they receive the gift of the other. A perfect communion of love. As we grow up, as we become adults, the disappointments that we experience in relationships can often mean that we find the desire for communion appealing in a way, but we're terrified of it as well. We want it and we fear it. And maybe we even convince ourselves, I shouldn't need this. I shouldn't actually need community or communion. It's not really important. At the end of the day, what's important is that I'm a self-made man, that I'm autonomous, that I get my education and job, and I further my career, and I'm in control. That's what's important. Because then I'm safe, and I've done all the things I'm supposed to do. So then anyone looking from the outside of my life will say, well, fair play, everything looks great. Career, job, so on and so forth. It all looks good. Family, everything looks fine. But that doesn't in any way reflect what's going on inside, if what's motivating us is fear. That terror of trusting our hearts to anyone. In our reading today from St. Paul to the Ephesians, he says, bear with one another charitably, in complete selflessness, gentleness, and patience. Do all you can to preserve the unity of the Spirit by the peace that binds you together. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were all called into one and the same hope when you were called, calling us to be one, to be united, to be in communion, which is a lovely idea. The idea is amazing. The reality requires work. The reality requires self-sacrifice. The reality requires renouncing your will. And that's where we struggle. That's where we struggle. So the idea is lovely. Yes, let us all be one. It sounds fantastic. Even like the revolution at the end of the 60s there, the idea was that, it's all come together right now and so on. So it's great. It's like the idea of unity and oneness, and it's all fantastic. And no boundaries and no barriers and no race and no economic difference and all this kind of thing, and no war. It sounds fantastic, but it's a really immature understanding of what communion is. Communion isn't just like a problem out there. Like the problem is an oppressive regime. The problem is war. Yeah, while they're not helpful, the number one barrier to unity or communion is me. Is my fear of actually letting people in. My fear of vulnerability. My fear of having to renounce my own will. This is what impedes unity. This is what impedes communion. It's something that we've been created for. So we're created for communion and we fear it. We've been created for it and we impede it. And as I say, things can look perfect on the outside, but in the inside, just be full of walls and fear and self-protection and all of that. So, what can we do? Well, I think it's helpful for a start to recognize that if that's where we are, if that's where your heart is, I think it's good to call it out. It's good to kind of, if you will, diagnose the issue. If you feel that you want communion and you're terrified of it as well, it's good to actually say that out loud. Lord, I want to be in communion with you. I want a deeper relationship with you, but I'm terrified of it. I'm terrified you will change my life. I'm terrified you will change my plans. I'm terrified that if I give my heart or my life to you, you're going to want me to be single, or you're going to want me to be married, which I don't want at all, or you're going to want me to be religious, which I don't want, or you're going to want me to be, a victim soul. God help us, do you know what I mean? It's like this idea that as soon as you give yourself to God, he's going to wreck everything. He's going to wreck your plans. If that's not straight from the bowels of hell, I don't know what is. That idea that as soon as you give yourself to God, he's going to ruin things. What kind of a father do we think he is? What kind of a God do we think he is? I mean, is this the God of love and compassion? Or is this the God who just plays with you just to see how you'll get on? Throw some rats into his bed and see how he reacts. What kind of a God do we think he is? Is he a loving father, or is he a game master? So maybe it goes back right to the foundational thought of what is your identity? Who are you? And who's he? And we know who we are with reference to who he is. Who am I? Do I believe that I am a beloved son or daughter of God? If that is a firm belief, if that identity is solid, then I think trusting him with our hearts is much easier. If I don't believe that, why on earth would you entrust your heart to God? Why would you? So it's funny how these kind of elaborate concepts come back to that basic question in the end. Who are you before God? What is your identity, your deepest identity? Are you, or do you believe that you are a beloved child of God? Or do you believe that, again, that's a notion or an ideal, but ultimately you're autonomous and you have to make your way through life yourself? That's what we're supposed to do, right? We're supposed to get on with things and realize ourselves and realize our abilities and our capacities and fulfill our dreams, and it's all kind of focused on you doing everything on your own. And then at the end of it, people will applaud and say, wasn't he amazing? Started a company, started a beautiful family, whatever. They were rich and had their Spanish holidays every year, so well done, job completed, successful. But if we do that independently of God, we've missed the whole point. We've missed the whole point of life. To enter into communion with God so that I can enter into communion with him for all eternity. That's the greatest good. But if I fear that communion, if I fear that unity now, do I want heaven? which is perfect communion with him for all eternity. Do I even want that if I don't want it now? If I fear it now, if I impede that now, do I want that for all eternity? It's a scary question. We came up in catechism yesterday about, who goes to hell and that sort of thing. If I don't want God, I don't have to have him. But anything that is not God for all eternity is hell. Anything that is not God, but that just won't stop. Anything that is not God for all eternity is hell. So we get what we want. Shocking, the power of our freedom. We get what we want, but for all eternity. But anything that's not God for all eternity, it'll get so boring and sickening and empty, and yet I chose it. I chose it. So what do we want? What do you want? If we want him, he has wanted us from all eternity. If we want communion with him, he has leveled the plains and he has made every grace available to us and for us. So nothing lacks from his side. From his side, the door is open. Do we trust him? Do we know our identity as beloved sons and daughters? Do I trust him? So maybe at this point, you're feeling a little short of the mark. But then, let's come to the Lord in trust-filled prayer. Lord, I believe, but help my unbelief. Amen.